terms of formal industry education, I'm short on that. I went to liberal arts college and majored in economics, a minor in English writing, so about as far from being educated in the industry as you could be. Now it's funny. Early on in my career, I worked for the state of Vermont in their Department of Finance and Management, and that was around the 2008 timeframe. So our office was responsible for setting up the Recovery Act office and compliance. So I was exposed to it from that standpoint, from the infrastructure standpoint. Trying to figure out what a shovel-ready project was, which I think was the buzzwords around that time. So I spent a couple of years doing that, and then from there, my primary background has been in corporate strategy and software, and particularly bringing new technology products to market. Starting at Fidelity Investments and then moving on to commercial software companies in fintech, and the last 2.5 years have been my first formal foray into build design and construction industry, and did a lot of been a huge learning experience for me, because I don't think the regular person really appreciates the level of complexity of the workflows in this space. The challenges of sharing information over a 15-year project with dozens of different stakeholders. So it's been a great learning experience for me, but still certainly have a lot to learn.
Can you tell me a little bit about Newforma and how it fits
Sure.
into the infrastructure industry?
Yeah, so we work with a lot of the large engineering firms in the space, a lot of large multidiscipline firms that work on large infrastructure projects. And what we're focused on is really collaboration and information management in design through construction. I think design firms, particularly engineering firms, have a unique role in this space, that given that they're involved from the early planning stages all the way through project closeout. So those challenges span over many years. They're dealing with a lot of coordination problems across external firms. You've got people out in the field. You've got probably a lot of different levels of sophistication of the different partners that will work on different sections of the project, and they're responsible for bringing that all together. And we're excited to help them do it.
So Newforma recently released a new study, Finding
Yeah.
Common Ground: The Future of Project Information Management. Can you tell me a little bit about why that study was undertaken? What are some of its key findings our audience should know about?
Why undertake a study? I think, unselfishly, to help firms benchmark their own practices against each other, against what the industry is showing, selfishly, to help us think about where to invest our research and development and product and in our product to help solve some of those challenges. So one, discovery and information for the market, and then we feed that back into how we think about what we should be working on to help the industry overcome those challenges. I think one of the things is how difficult it is to keep all the different stakeholders on a large complex product on the same page over a project life cycle. I think especially when you talk about infrastructure, you're talking about projects that can last 5, 10, 15 years. It's not at the level of residential construction where you're talking about 6 months and you're done. Plus you've got just the number of different environmental studies to get through, public hearings to get through, all of that planning and research that has to go into it, all the different specialists that have to be involved. It kind of makes sense, right? It makes sense that it'd be a challenge. I know, there are times when I'm sure you can relate. It's hard it becomes a little bit difficult to collaborate with, people inside your own organization in different departments. So when you think about dozens of stakeholders, emails, tens of thousands of emails, these complex, unique workflows that are, I think, meaningful in making sure that projects are delivered correctly. And I think when you think about something as critical as infrastructure, mistakes have not only costs in terms of money, but can have serious costs in terms of the human life and experience. So it's very important that everything's done right, that everything's got the right sign-offs, and that you're following the process for exchanging information and making sure people are working from the right versions and the communications are fluent throughout.
Okay, you talk a bit about the difficulties in sharing information. What were some of the historical difficulties that kind of got us here?
Obviously, building has been happening since long before there was this concept of is your firm digital. So you're talking about like packages of sheets and drawings and physical documents needing to get routed, from offices where they're being put together out into the fields and managing that. And then you've got the introduction of a more digital format for that kind of stuff. But one, the file sizes are very big. Two, you've got all these disparate stakeholders that once they get those files into their environment, start working on a version. And how do you keep those versions in sync over that period of time? And then you've got these really structured, unique contract workflows that require the right set of sign-offs from the key stakeholders. So you don't want to make a decision around some kind of material that should go into a beam without making sure that the structural engineer was involved. And same thing, if you're making a decision about wiring or piping, you need to make sure that the whole group is on the same page with changes as they're being made, and that all the implications of those changes are well understood in terms of the project, not just from a budget standpoint, but again, because these are real physical spaces where people are spending time, and mistakes have real costs in that sense. So I think that's where the idea of firing the stuff across inbox, and you're talking about 5, 10, 15 years, you could have totally different set of people working on these things at various times. It's not great if things are getting siloed in one person's email address, if these contract workflows are stalling out at certain points and you're not getting the right eyes on changes throughout the project. So there needs to be a way of one, setting a process, and then having a way to report out on that process to make sure that everything's going as it should, and that everyone's on the same page.
Okay, it sounds like the information sharing gets held up sometimes by bottlenecks. What do you think are some of the most common bottlenecks, and how can they be avoided?
Look, I think email is an example of that. Not everyone that needed to be CC'd was CC'd, so someone's on vacation, that can become a problem. People, if you rely on individuals to always upload the new version of the file and make sure that changes have been recorded and communicated, that can add to, because you've got people working in a bunch of different software solutions in design and in engineering, and they might save a version somewhere, and the work is done, but how has that communication gotten to every stakeholder? And again, when you're talking about large distributed project teams, that can be a bottleneck. And then I think I think the file sizes are often very, very large. So you run into just what's the technical approach? How do we get a gigabyte model from point A to point B? It's funny to think about in 2022, but that still is a challenge if you're talking about large packages of information. And then if you've got some people working in email, deal with some kind of special file transfer solution. Those things are not synchronized in many cases. So now you've got two different sets of communications going through two different methods of communication, and it's difficult to keep those things synchronized.
Okay, so we covered a little bit about some of the poorer ways of trying to share information. What do you think would be either the best or a more ideal way to do this kind of information sharing?
Yeah, I think it's really about one, working with the partners to define a process at the beginning of the product, over communicating. and then making sure that, the tools that you use, and obviously I'm biased on what those should be, but that's not as important, to the industry. What's important to the industry is that you have a set of solutions, and those solutions can, enforce the process that's been designed. And then lastly, can you report out at that? Can you report out at that at like a senior level, so that, you know, there's a level of oversight where people can kind of drill in and see where communications bottlenecks are happening.
Okay, if you were to give engineers one bit of advice on maybe like, okay, so they're trying to figure this out and they don't know a lot, so they can just get the best start that they can get, what would you kind of recommend to them to start and to go from?
I think it's that early and transparent, communicating with the project team, defining that process, and then working from it. Right, you need to set the standards up front so that there are no surprises, down the line. And two, I mean, again, it's not a plug, but making sure that you have the systems in place that can handle the level of complexity that the project demands. Can it connect all these? Can it connect the information where it needs to be connected? Can it manage all the different workflows that need to be managed? And can it, avoid the type of silos and disparate document versions and types of things that can cause chaos as you move through the planning stage, through construction, and to closeout.
Okay, so if the engineers are doing the work and the designing, how can they though convince the management and those setting up these platforms that this is what we need to do our
Yeah.
jobs better? Is there any advice for them?
So, I mean, it's always about, at some level, it's always about selling the benefits of doing it this right. Like think about like the cost, just from the pure impact of cost and risk management that are avoided by, determining this stuff up front and by agreeing to it up front, versus treating it as a detail that, just people need to work through it and do brute force, this brute force approaches to it. I think you have to take that approach to project management. It's as as a part of the business. I'm not going to say it's as important as creating great designs, but it's in terms of actually delivery. And I mean, talking about a really complex thing here, right? You're talking about turning ideas and drawings into a huge, complex physical space that serves a very specific purpose. It's not just about the ideation there. It's about delivering that, and delivering that requires keeping a lot of different people on the same page over a long period of time.
Right. So I think when they're trying to make sure that's project sharing, they've got to work with many other groups. How do they all get together and decide, hey, this is the best way to do things? Is it trial and error? Do they need like pilot studies? What are some ways that they can figure out and decide what's best for them in this project?
I think it's relying on experience. It's relying on the relationships that you build in delivering one project to the next, making sure you have, you're tracking what went well and what didn't from a collaboration perspective, and developing a set of best practices that I think, as much as, having the skill sets for doing that hardcore design work, you need to have the skill sets in place to know how to coordinate and manage a project from a delivery standpoint. So that's the kind of stuff that I think evolves over time with experience and with developing a set of vendors that work for that firm's specific processes.
Okay, in some ways, like just accessing and all the project information can be a problem. What are some of the better ways that engineers and designers can do that?
So there's a lot of different file repositories out there. I think there's a lot of different ways to make sure that you're aggregating that stuff. Again, not to plug Newforma, but Newforma, in my view, is one of them. But making sure that System X is where the latest version of this type of document will be. System Y is for this type of document, and then making sure that you're managing communications and not letting things get siloed in Teams chats and email inboxes. It's creating a central aggregated record of the project that everyone can work from over that project life.
Can you give me just a quick run through a short version of how like using Newforma would allow people to do this? Maybe like just kind of a case study, kind of a run through of how it would work.
One of the strong features of Newforma, to my way of thinking it, is that it does create that aggregated view of project data. So it doesn't require that you move versions into a new system. It connects to the storage softwares that you already are using. So when you save something, you pull up the Newforma dashboard, the document, the latest version of the document is there. And if you've got people working in modeling software, you've got people working in Microsoft software, you've got people working from files that are on your local file server. It's showing you all of that in one view. And then I think the next piece of that is it's managing the relationships from disparate pieces of information. So it's this drawing is related to that RFI. How does this submittal, what was the email traffic around a certain submittal, or what was the informal communication record around a formal contract workflow. So that's where I think some of the stuff that we do with our email added is again, email is a place where a lot of this communication can get trapped. We have a tool that's right in your inbox, lets you file the email to the project record. Oftentimes something comes in, it looks like an email, except is that's actually an RFI. You just grab that email, file it as an RFI. Now it's being tracked in your RFIs and submittals log. So it's all about creating a solution set that's very purpose built for this use case, and making sure that all the information is tracked from its origin point, and that information that's coming in can be integrated into that project record, and it's there for you as throughout the planning phase, throughout the delivery phase, and until the closeout phase. We're excited. We're just excited to be in the space. We're excited to see where collaboration goes in this space. I think there's a lot of exciting things that can be unlocked with the adoption of BIM and 3D modeling and 3D visualization that will make project delivery more seamless and easier and with fewer mistakes. And we're excited to keep bringing products to market that solve these big collaboration challenges.